There isn't anybody who cares more about long-term sustainability than actual farmers, because a lot of those people, well, not only do they want to farm for decades, which is a much longer time span horizon than most politicians and most people, but a lot of them would like to be able to have their children do the same thing. And they don't want to degrade the topsoil, and they don't want to pollute the water, and so, but they want to produce as much food as they possibly can. And
God said, I need somebody willing to get up before dawn, milk cows, work all day in the fields, milk cows again, eat supper, then go to town and stay past midnight at a meeting of the school board. So God made a farmer.
I have a responsibility to do good, speak up and call it exactly how I see it. I just couldn't hear anyone else saying what we were saying at the pub or at home.
Our land is tough, and so are our people.
Yeah, because we stand up for your property rights. The overreach of government and their corporations. Look at the way policy is developed. Australia is at war with its own industries.
How can policy designed to protect the environment on one hand permanently destroy much-loved Australian landscapes and native flora and fauna on the other hand? Dwight D. Eisenhower said, "Farming looks mighty easy when your plough is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles away from the cornfield." Do you think it's time our elected representatives put down their pencils and take a walk beside Australian farmers?
I'm urging the organisers of local opposition groups across the state to closely coordinate to oppose the entire monstrosity. Yes, keep up the pressure in your own region, but we need a better organised statewide campaign that basically says not in our backyard, not in anyone's backyard. And
they're gutting our communities, and it's a death of 1,000 cuts to every single country town in this nation, and it is happening. I'm seeing it with my own eyes. We think that the 5 pillars that are holding Australia up, that keep our nation the way it is, are our productive farmlands, our rural landscapes, our wildlife habitats, our Australian way of life, but the one that I love the most is our strong communities. Those are the things that keep this country where it is right now.
It had to be somebody who'd plow deep and straight and not cut corners. Somebody to seed, weed, feed, breed, and rake and disc and plow and plant and tie the fleece and strain the milk. Somebody who'd bale a family together with the soft, strong bonds of sharing.
Let's get our hands back on the wheel and take Australia where we, Australians, want it to go.
Hello everyone, welcome to the first episode of Rural Resolutions. My name is Sally Edwards, or Sal. Thank you all for joining us. I want to start tonight with a request. I'm not a seasoned live streamer, and this is a far stretch from Zoom, so I'm wearing L plates tonight and for the first few episodes, and I appreciate your understanding as I figure this out, along the way and live. Rural Resolutions came about as we realised there was a need for focused discussions about what challenges rural Australia, inviting strong local voices to discuss what is really happening on the ground in their community, and potential solutions that seek to protect our land and water, our people, agriculture and food production, and put rural communities first. Why? Because rural voices matter. And there simply isn't enough people talking about protecting the future of rural Australia. If you are tuned in live tonight, we would love to hear your questions. Please type your questions in the chat and we will try and answer those as best we can. The first Rural Resolutions discussion is with Emma Bowman. Emma is a 5th-generation mixed farmer from Dunedoo in central West New South Wales, who has a deep love of animals and life on the land. She is a tireless community advocate and passionate about protecting Australia's agricultural industries and rural communities. After witnessing the treatment of landowners affected by transmission projects and given her first-hand experience with compulsory acquisition, Emma has supported landowners and spent countless hours attempting to improve community consultation and involvement in the rollout of the rapid transition to renewable energy, and in the delivery of the Central West Arana Renewable Energy Zone, the state's and Australia's first REZ. Emma is going to share a little of her background and step us through what the last 5 years has looked like for her, in the CWO REZ and on top of running her farm. The journey has been a masterclass in an out-of-control bureaucracy, frustration, exhaustion, and ultimately persistence. We will do our best to keep our language family-friendly, but just a caution for little ears in case we slip up. Now, let's get to it and bring Emma on. Welcome, Emma.
Hi, Sal.
Thanks for being the willing first cab off the rank as we learn the do's and as I learn the do's and don'ts of live streaming. I'm really glad you're here. Thank you. I want to quickly start with something that we believe is often not shared with the public, and that's some transparency. Through the REZ rollout and now, do you wear any formal hats or hold any volunteer positions?
So most recently, I have become a board member on Property Rights Australia and recently the vice chair.
Very good. Do you or have you ever received any funds from donors, fossil fuel companies or mining giants?
No, I have not.
Are you an active member of any political party?
I am a member of the Libertarian Party, have been for probably just over 12 months.
And how would you best describe your motivating force to be publicly involved in rural advocacy?
Look, I think the motivation is the treatment of transmission affected landowners. That is probably what kicked it off, and then falling down that rabbit hole and seeing the whole legislation that we are seeing roll out that is not going to improve. In fact, I think it is going to make agriculture and rural and regional and remote communities worse off. So that is the impetus for me being involved and sticking it out, I suppose.
Thanks for that. Now that we have that out of the way, unlike the IPC meetings, the inquiry hearing, and other public meetings, there is no restrictive time limit to share your experiences tonight. We have a lot of ground to cover, but let's start with who is or maybe was Emma Bowman. Can you share with us a short background of what life looked like for you before the REZ, from childhood through to just before you found out about the CWO REZ?
So I grew up on the family farm here just outside 𝗥𝗂𝗿 in central west New South Wales. I have two older sisters. All three of us went to boarding school in Sydney. I left school early and came home and worked for mum and dad. Ended up going back to Sydney for a little while, did a photography course for 6 months, hated living in Sydney still, thought that might have been different after school, but didn't change. So came back home, which has been the only place that I think I've really ever wanted to be. And yeah, have worked for Dad for, I've been at home for over 20 years and worked for Dad until Jono and I took over the family farm maybe 4 years ago now. We went through succession planning and took over the family farm, and here we are, I suppose. We are focused on a self-replacing merino flock, and we have poll Hereford and shorthorn cattle, which are just self-replacing breeding herds as well. And we do a bit of cropping, mainly for fodder for stock is the main reason for that. Only if we have extra do we sell grain or, make hay or that sort of stuff. But my focus is mostly on the livestock. I'm not big on sitting on the tractor, but I do to feed them. But yeah, we're pretty passionate about our sheep and cattle and have horses, breeding a few horses every now and then and trying to train them, and when time permits, we ride them. So that's basically it.
For any viewers that aren't from the country, maybe could you tell us a bit about what are the final products that you produce from your farm by the time they reach the consumer?
So sheep-wise, we produce meat. So our cast for age ewes are sold for mutton. Our wether lambs are generally sold for meat as well. They used to be wool growers as a general rule in the district. Probably even before I came home, I think we might have switched more to meat production with them. And then obviously the wool from anything becomes your clothing, whether it be blended in with something else or pure wool garments. Cattle-wise, beef obviously is pretty much the story with them. We do try and eat our own meat to make sure that what we are producing is what we're trying to produce. But yeah, we generally turn off our steers as feedlot steers, sort of 12 to 16, sometimes 18 months old if things aren't going quite to plan. Obviously, sometimes earlier, like this last year, we did ditch our steers fairly early because we had a dry spell and didn't have anything for them to eat. But yeah, and then just we're probably running 200 cows that we carve down twice a year. So we carve in February, March, and in July, August as well. And then we've just finished lambing. So we lamb in May for 4 weeks.
Very good. And that sounds like an awful lot of work and a lot of moving parts to focus on in normal times. And in the last 5 years, we have had this thing called a renewable energy zone placed upon our region, and that is how we first met. Maybe step us through how you first found out about the REZ or the renewable projects and what that looked like initially and where it led you.
I think initially it was very much just a thing on the side. You know, there was a wind project at 𝗥𝘂𝗿 and you would hear a few other things, you know, the wind project at Wellington that went through and then closer to Mudgee, and solar at Wellington and then near Goulgong. So it was kind of in the back of our minds, but it didn't feel like it was right on our doorstep. And so I think it's a bit like everyone, and until it suddenly affects you or you feel like it's threatening you, it's on the radar, but you kind of feel like, oh, what can I really do about it? So I think probably the thing that really opened my eyes was when the REZ was declared, and I can't 100% remember where I was or when I first heard about it, but I remember the clear feeling of, what the hell is a REZ and what does that mean? Like it kind of didn't make any sense. I think there were early meetings of local landowners that were concerned about it, that tried to get a group off the ground early on about the transmission, that were concerned about the transmission. And I think, again, it's one of those things that you feel like when it's not actually on your doorstep, or you're not the one getting the letter from Energy Co to say you're under the transmission corridor, you almost feel like, what can I do about it? It wasn't really until I learnt about, you know, the first meetings that landowners were having with Energy Co and what those were looking like, and the threats of compulsory acquisitions right from the start, that I kind of went, hang on a minute, this is all getting a little out of hand. I think we need to have a look into what this means and what it actually is. And I think the thing that led me down that path is, so our property is split by the Golden Highway. It's actually the part of the Golden Highway that is the Castlereagh Highway and Golden Highway. So it's a double highway, and it's the bane of my existence, has been forever. But we got approached, it was probably 2016 or 17, that they were going to upgrade the highway. And long story short, they came to us and said, we want 40 metres of your land on one side of the road and we want 30 metres on the other. And Dad and I sat there and went, what the heck do you need all that land for? Like, you know, we all know what the sides of roads look like and how well government land is managed. So we kind of fought back on that. But our first meeting, they said to us, if you don't like it, we can compulsorily acquire it. And that is not something that, you know, when you own freehold land, you don't think that someone can just come and take it, especially the government. So I think that obviously fired us up a little bit, and we had a good fight for 18 months, and that was fairly hellish. We probably ended up in a better situation than a lot of people, and we did not get compulsorily acquired. We made an agreement, but I saw what that was doing to people and what that looked like, and I saw red and went, no, this is rubbish. You can't just be doing this to people. It's crap. So that's when I fell down the rabbit hole, I think you could adequately describe it as.
Yeah. I think there would be a few landowners that are very grateful that you did fall down that rabbit hole and came to join them in this fight. So what happened next? You heard about locals. They were having meetings with Energy Co that were leaving them frustrated and distressed and in a state of confusion. What did you do, and what was it next for those under that easement?
So I guess, you know, we were hearing stories about people that, you know, Energy Co was just turning up, knocking on the door, or finding them in the paddock and laying out a map on the car bonnet or somewhere in the paddock and just saying, righto, well, this is your property and this is what the easement might look like on your property. It was a study corridor at first, so it was, I don't know, it might have been 3 k's wide at first, and then it might have gone down to 1 kilometre wide. And ultimately, so those people that were seeing the maps were told, you know, you can only see the map of what this looks like on your property. So you can't even see where it might be coming from on your neighbours. And you can't take a photo. You can't keep the map. You know, that it was red flags the whole way through. So you've got people that were looking at having to host 2 500 kV lines and 1 330 in the same easement. So those are not just your little power poles that we see dotted all over the country. They're the big spider web ones that are like 80 meters tall. So you've got 240 meters, and one landowner that I dealt with a lot and still talk to a lot, he's got 600 acres that the easement is effectively cutting his property in half, and the easement would be somewhere along the lines of 100 acres. So it's a sixth of his property that he's being cut in half. And then they're being told there's all these restrictions that you can't take machinery above a certain height underneath it. So we ended up, you know, we got a few landowners together. We had meetings about, you know, who was being impacted where. And I think one of the biggest things was Energy Co was very willing to pull people apart and keep people apart. That was their tactic. Don't let everyone get together and talk about, you know, what they're offering you or what they're doing to you. And at one end of the transmission line, they're telling landowners that everyone up the other end is happy with it. What are you worried about? Like, don't get so concerned. Everyone else is happy. So I think it was very much not a big picture. So no one could actually see what this was going to look like in the end. There's no rollout of, okay, you've got lines here, then you've got an energy hub here, and this is what that'll look like. It was very much a staged approach of, oh no, we'll just get everyone over the line with the transmission lines first, and then we'll move on to the next part. So I think at first it was more about gathering information, you know, trying to get to people. And I think one of the biggest things that happened in this region was that landowners who were also impacted by transmission had already signed options or had signed agreements to host wind and solar. So that effectively pulled us apart from the start. And I think when you've signed an agreement to host wind or solar, your negotiating power is a long way below what you have if you haven't already signed that agreement. So I think a lot of those landowners were told to sit down and shut up because they'd signed an agreement elsewhere. So I think we were behind the 8 ball right from the start, and there were quite a lot of people that didn't want to talk about what agreements they may or may not have signed, or what it might have looked like on their property. So we were flying blind with a lot of the transmission easement as a whole. Res.
Yeah. The drip feeding of information has been a strategy the whole way along, hasn't it? You look at the wind project around Coolah, there were people that would have signed years and years, maybe even a decade before the REZ was even announced to the public. So they had no idea. We then had, the REZ information or the transmission information being drip fed to the those in the easements. And at the same time, the wider public and the communities are being drip fed information project by project. And there was no way to understand where their place fit in the REZ and what it meant. And so when that happened and people were pulling bits of information from here and not knowing what was happening over there, what steps did you take? What did you have to do?
So I trawled through the major projects portal, which is where all these big developments, where their environmental impact statements and the information about those projects is put on that portal. So I trawled through that project by project to find every project in the REZ and try to get, number of panels, number of hectares that will be taken up, water use, traffic impacts, traffic movements per day, just to try and get a little bit of an idea of what it looked like as a whole when you added it all up, because we were going to drop-in sessions for one project over here and they tell you, oh no, it's okay, it's only X amount of hectares, or it's only 40 turbines or whatever. And that's all well and good because that was their project. But then you've got, we ended up with, it's over 50 projects operating, under construction, and in various stages of planning in the Central West Orana REZ. And I haven't updated my spreadsheet for a while, and there haven't been huge movements, I don't think. But it would still be over 50 projects. And you've got to, they don't all, put all their information just in one simple document that says, righto, we're going to have this many traffic movements, we're going to use this much water. You have to search through and find it all, and it's not very easy, and it's not exactly fun. But I did spend a lot of time doing that, and I know other people did a similar thing, just so that we could see what it might look like as a whole rather than just piece by piece. And I think that's where Energy Co, as the infrastructure planner for the REZs, that's where they've missed the mark completely. That to me is their role.
They failed. Yeah. So 2 things on that. When were you doing all this, going through all these documents and reading all this stuff? Because as you've said, you do actually run a productive farm. And the other part that I want you to touch on is what wasn't in documents, because I remember doing my submission, and so many times the information I would go looking for said, oh, this will be in this plan or that, management document or whatever. So yeah, over to you. What how do you see those?
So I did. There were a lot of late nights. There were also probably a lot of times during the day that I should have been doing other things that I wasn't because this was important. You know, I still ride around on the farm going, oh God, if only we'd, you know, renewed that fence 5 years ago, or God, that shouldn't look like that. My grandfather would be rolling in his grave because, you know, there's a stick out of place or whatever. So there's all those time constraints that, you know, I don't do fun things anymore. That's the time that you spend on the computer trawling through documents or that sort of stuff. It, you know, that's your spare time. I did used to joke to people that I had to, you know, do the res job 5 days a week because obviously that's when people are at work, and then I did my full-time farm job in the 2 days on the weekend. So it wasn't entirely productive on either side because I was probably a pretty cranky person and not all that nice to be around. Probably that still stands sometimes, I suggest. But it just seemed like something that no one else was going to do unless someone from the community did it. So, and you know, I'm pretty pig-headed and stubborn. So once I put my mind to it, I just decided I had to do it. As for all the stuff that's missing, if I hear detailed design or further refinement one more time, I will probably scream, because that is how they get these projects through and then make heaps of decisions afterwards that actually should have community and local input and local knowledge. Like that, just because, you know, I don't have a degree doesn't mean that I don't know how the water runs on my place, or and that's something that we found with the highway upgrade. You could stand with an engineer and tell them until you were blue in the face that the water runs in X position when it rains, and they will stand there and say, no, our modeling says it's over here, and you can't get through to them, and that is one of my biggest concerns. Yes, modeling probably has its place, but you can't stand with someone like my father who has lived on this place for 70 years and tell them how that works. It's, you know, just because you've been to uni for 6 years to become an engineer doesn't mean that you know everything. And often I think that is when the bad outcomes happen, is when you don't listen to local knowledge, or, you know, you think you know best. And that is what we've seen roll out time after time with infrastructure projects. And that is my biggest fear for all of these projects, is that the ultimate impacts will be devastating for this region.
So before the transmission project environmental impact statement went on exhibition, there was a significant, in their words, community engagement process in the lead up to that. And the EIS then went on display at the same time as these, maybe, I don't know, maybe there was 30 odd projects for the REZ in the portal or within our sphere of awareness at that time. What did it look like at the EIS stage, and what issues were raised locally prior to the EIS were either acknowledged or ignored, or like where was the community at that point in time?
Oh, I think fumbling around in the dark, honestly. I think we had so little knowledge of what the process even was going to be. And, you know, you throw an environmental impact statement of, I think it was approximately 10,000 pages, at community members who, one, this is not what we're trained in. Two, most of us have full-time jobs, families, all of the rest of it. And you expect them to read, digest, understand and respond to that in 4 weeks. That was the original time frame, was 4 weeks to do that. We did get an extension of 2 weeks, but that was only a week before the exhibition period was meant to end. So it was pretty much fumbling around in the dark. It was, look, we had been to consultation sessions, but it was always, all our questions were always met with, we don't know yet, or, you know, some BS answer that didn't satisfy the questioner, and often that ended in frustration. So there were town hall community meetings at the start. There were only a handful of them from my recollection, and some of them did get fairly heated. But Energy Co and whoever else was involved in those, whether the Department of Planning was involved in some of those early on, I can't remember. But they didn't help themselves. They didn't bring people that knew anything about the project. And in hindsight, I would suggest there was no one that knew anything more about the project than the people that were there, which is a big red flag in itself. And, you know, you put, without looking at my list of when all the projects went on exhibition, there were a lot of projects that popped up for environmental impact statements that went on exhibition, in that there was a 12 to 18 month period there that I think there were a few months that there wasn't an environmental impact statement on exhibition. So you've got people that are trying to do their full-time job as well as trying to get across the potential impacts for their properties with environmental impact statements and assessments that say, oh no, well, we'll work that out further down the track. It was a clusterfuck. Like, it was terrible. I think it was stressful and frustrating, and Energy Co wondered why people got angry. And then they came and changed their entire community engagement team approximately halfway through the EIS exhibition. Like, if that, I still can't believe that happened, because, you know, you think that you kind of make an impact or have a relationship with someone in that role, and they know what questions you've asked and probably haven't been answered, and how frustrated you may or may not be. And then they take everyone in those roles out and start with a whole new lot that they were not across the project. So
No.
we had community members that knew a lot more about the project than they did. And they wondered why we got even more frustrated. And then, you know, they have the hide to tell us that we're dangerous, or, you know, they don't want to come to the region anymore because we've got pitchforks and we're terrible people. Well, they forced our hand in a way there because of the way that they handled it.
So out of all of the engagement staff and the senior project staff on the ground during that time, how many are still there today?
I don't think I can say that there is one still there. I don't think in the exhibition time, there's a few that are still hanging around from a bit after that, but I don't think any of them still exist in that capacity anyway. There's a few that have popped up in other places, but not for Energy Co.
Yeah.
And I think, Sal, the confusing thing, and the thing that threw all of us, was we were being told that they were Energy Co staff. They weren't. They were consultants and contractors. And it's wrong. Like, the transparency, they came into the region and they got us on the wrong foot right from the start. You know, they could have been honest with us, they could have been transparent, and, you know, that goes a long way with regional people, generally speaking. But it was very secretive, and no one knew who anyone was or where they existed. There was no, you know, family tree of who's who in the zoo. It was, you had to dig through to try and find out who these people were, and then by the time you worked it out, they were gone.
it begs the question, doesn't it? Is that part of the government strategy successfully delivering a project which goes, it will more than likely go against the wants of so many people in rural areas? Do they deliberately have a whole new team for delivery that wasn't on the ground during planning, so that you can't have those conversations? Don't you remember what you said to me? Don't you remember what you told the room in Dunedoo? Like, there's no consistency in information giving, so then it actually removes accountability, because they can safely say, I wasn't there, or I wasn't in that role, or whatever. It just begs the question, is it a deliberate strategy? And the cynics in us would probably say yes, but
yeah.
Rightio. So there were some major potential problems identified even before the EIS, and they were raised formally. One of those was telecommunications and what would happen when we bring all of these temporary workforces for each project to the region. Tell us about those, the issues that were ignored and what it's looking like now.
So, well, telecommunications is a huge one. I think, well, most people that live rurally probably can tell you that our connectivity is getting worse, not better, which is funny considering that you would think that the technology is improving. So why wouldn't our connectivity improve? I live in the middle of 3 Telstra towers. I can see all 3 of them. And every now and then well, it's not even every now and then, probably every 2 to 3 months, we have a period of 10 days to 2 weeks where we cannot make phone calls. It just, other people can hear us, but you can't hear them. And we're not the only ones. It's in the district. So our telecommunications are getting significantly worse. And this is something that was raised. I did have a look today. 𝗥𝘂𝗿 raised telecommunications as an opportunity at the first regional reference group for the Central West Orana REZ in October 2020. So then the first CRG meeting, so the community reference group for the Central West Orana REZ, the meeting minutes state, so this was November 2022, that telecommunication upgrades have been included in the scope for the network operator tender. So ACE REZ, I can't tell you off the top of my head when they were first, when they got the contract for the network operator. But we have not seen any upgrades. We've seen huge influx of workers on the ground, but they still haven't rolled anything out. Now, to me, telecommunications was a no-brainer. 𝗥𝘂𝗿 just needed to throw some money at Telstra and say, here, upgrade these towers around here and let's make these people a little bit happier. Like, it was no-brainer. It would have been so easy. But now we are still talking. So March 2026, I was told by 𝗥𝘂𝗿 that they're developing a telecommunications uplift program. So it's progressing in partnership with the New South Wales Telco Authority. Now, they've been telling me things about that since 2023. So let's just suggest that I'm probably going to be dead by the time that they deliver that, which it's ridiculous. And you talk to ACE REZ about telecommunications and they tell us that their workforce is not going to impact the connectivity in the region. And you ask them how that is going to happen, and they tell us that they have Starlink at the camp. So that means that there won't be any impact from their workforce. But when you ask them what happens when they leave the camp, do they leave their mobile phones at the camp? You know, hadn't really thought of that. Like, their scope of looking at at the impacts is so small and so frustrating, but there are still no answers. I think the latest CRG meeting in May, they're meant to have had a confidential briefing on what the uplift program looks like. But like I said, don't hold your breath, because I'd suggest we're all going to be dead by the time that happens. And, you know, telecommunications is the tip of the iceberg. The impacts that we're seeing from traffic and local workforce, business procurement, that was, you know, local businesses were promised the world and have been delivered sweet FA. So yeah, look, I think I am yet to see something from the rollout of the CWO REZ that has been delivered to actually enhance our community or benefit our communities and ratepayers and landowners and farmers and everyone. It's, you know, there's been tidbits of money here and there, and there's been promises of huge things, but to me, all of those things should have been rolled out before they started construction, so that the impacts were mitigated, rather than us having to deal with the impacts and then go, oh, here's some money to make you feel a little bit better.
Well, you would think mitigating the impacts from the construction and the delivery would actually take priority over things that benefit or enhance the community, because first of all, you're taking away our way of life and our you know, our services in a way, like telecommunications and roads and water, and you're impacting things that are crucial to rural communities, but you're ignoring those while offering token community benefits over here that'll, you know, boost the, I don't know, showground pavilion upgrade or the footy team or whatever those community benefits are. But we've ignored all of these great impacts that are already starting, and probably it's only just the beginning, because the transmission project has only just started. There are a couple of projects built, but the rest is still yet to come. The temporary workforces, they're not here in their full capacity yet, are they?
No, they certainly are not. And I think too, Sal, the information that we are still being drip fed, you know, ACE REZ and Energy Co will say, oh, but the project updates tell you exactly what we're up to. It says road upgrades, constructing temporary accommodation. Like, it doesn't give you any detail, and maybe that's okay for some people, and that's all right. But for some people, they actually want to know what is happening and where it is happening. And when you go digging for that information, you generally tend to hit brick walls, and someone will tell you that, you know, that matter is closed. We're not talking to you about that anymore. And, you know, I've had that.
Yeah, and even ongoing updates, like we know as farmers that with the change of weather, whether it's wet or dry, that things are either postponed or drawn out, or, you know, the timelines change. And we all know that in project delivery, that's what happens. But they put out these notices that say this will be the expected time frame, but there's nowhere for, or not that I know of, unless you can tell me, there's nowhere where there's current information. Oh, well, this is the upgrade we've been waiting for 2 weeks. This is our expected delay. Or it may not even be from the weather. It might be supplier delays or whatever. You know, that stuff, it happens and things go wrong, but there's just nowhere to get that information. So Energy Co, since the EIS exhibition, they, at that time, they didn't have all of the landowners signed up, did they? No. At the time of the exhibition. So what has happened with Energy Co since? They did do a couple of town halls, then they morphed into drop-in sessions so that they just spoke to people one-on-one. And that seems to have been the change for the industry. Developers have been doing the same, doing drop-in sessions, holding street stalls where, you know, people stop and talk one-on-one. but there is a limit of information where a community is shared details and questions can be asked where the room and the community can hear those answers at the same time. There's no way of knowing at a drop-in session or at a market stall if Joe Blow was told, one answer to a question, and then Mary later in the afternoon was told completely the opposite answer because of who they were and where they live. Mm-hmm. And that transparency and honesty is important to people when it is impacting their homes and livelihoods in such a great way. So can you share with us what were the actions like of Energy Co in signing up landowners to this easement, and also of developers? What were the differences, and how have people found the whole process?
So I think, for a start, Energy Co's actions have been nothing but disgusting. There were landowners that were blatantly lied to, bullied, harassed. There's so many tales of, a landowner being told that staff or consultants were going onto their property to do X job, and the landowner finding them doing something completely different. Or, I know of another landowner who was told where the easement was likely going to go, and then found Energy Co consultants, contractors, whatever they were called, sniffing around in another area. Oh no, oh sorry, we're just in the wrong place. Well, that's where the line ended up being. So to go back a step, most of the landowners, when they were approached by Energy Co at first, did not simply say, piss off, I'm not going to hear from you again. That's it. We don't want this. There were a lot of them that were shocked and probably very hesitant, but that said, okay, well, maybe can we work something out? And if you put it on the boundary, or, don't go over my infrastructure and don't go over those trees, but we'll work around it if you can make those changes. So not all of them were a hard no at the start. And I think that's really important to note, because it is the process that has led a lot of the ones that are very opposed to it now to that state. And it is how Energy Co handled them and rolled it out that has exacerbated that issue. So following the EIS, I think it was before the EIS even finished, before that exhibition period finished, that landowners got an email to say that Energy Co intended on beginning the compulsory acquisition process within 21 days after that. So we're going to note that exhibition period finished in November. So what comes after November? Well, Christmas. So they did. They started that PAN process, the proposed acquisition notice, which is a 90-day window that you have to negotiate with Energy Co to come up with an agreement before they go down the compulsory acquisition path. They did that over Christmas. They rolled that out on those landowners over Christmas. Now, that, for a start, should have been a big no-no. One, because of the mental toll that took on them, and the stress that put on them over a time that I would suggest that Energy Co employees went home and had a lovely Christmas with their families. But two, how many businesses shut for 2, 3, 4 weeks over that time? So you've effectively taken legal services, accountancy services, all of those things out of commission for those landowners for, maybe it was only 2 weeks, but it's still 2 weeks. Like, it makes my blood boil. Because all they had to do was say, oh, well, sorry, we'll just wait 6 weeks and then we'll do this later. Like, was it ever going to be pleasant? No. But that's what happened. Now, the other thing about the compulsory acquisition, so Penny Sharp, the Minister for Energy in New South Wales, constantly quotes that I think it was 97% of the CWO REZ transmission landowners signed a negotiated agreement. So only 3% of them had their easements compulsorily acquired. Well, most of them, and a lot of them will probably tell anyone that will listen this, most of them had a gun to their head, essentially. They thought they didn't have a choice. They were being railroaded into something that they didn't think that they could see a way out of. So I think that's one of the other things that, the outward facing advertisements of what has gone on is not overly accurate either. So you've got then there's the developer side of it as well. So we've got Energy Co that's doing the transmission line. The transmission line obviously has to happen to have all of the other projects connect to it to get the power to where it needs to go. So Energy Co have got pretty rugged relationships with their landowners. Then you've got developers signing people up for wind and solar. Now, there is people that are willingly signing up for this. So even people that the developers are considering signing up, some of them have sought developers out. So I think that is a very different relationship to trying to propose a project either next door to someone or in their region. But there are developers that are going to people's homes, and I have heard stories that they are waiting until husband, son, father has left the house and women are in the house by themselves to essentially get a foot in the door in that way, or taking advantage of, country hospitality. Most people won't slam a door in your face. They'll ask you in for a cuppa or something like that. So I think there are all sorts of tactics at play here. But talking to people that have seen both sides of the story, as in either being a host, the developer is rolling out the red carpet for these people. They need them to make their project go ahead. So your experience with those people is going to be a lot different to being a neighbor or a landowner in the region that is not on board with the project. And people can tell you that there is a huge difference there. And I don't really know what to do about that, because the developers, and the government don't seem to want to hear from anyone that's not on board.
No, and we had these projects 5 years ago where they were talking to landowners and neighbours, and we had Energy Co come in and were talking to landowners about transmission, and there was a significant time there where it was even unclear which projects would connect to the transmission. So that was all unknown, and it was unknown for the developer as well. And we're told that this transmission, which is under construction, is only stage 1, and there's a potential stage 2 and 3. We have no transparency around where those transmission routes will go. So we know that there will be further angst and disruption to, a group of landowners that will fall under that line. But there's also currently these landowners in those areas being approached by these developers now. So we are 5 years in, but the same things are happening today that will be the next projects or the next transmission. But what we have on the plate, it's already falling over and off the side, and the plate's teetering because things are going wrong, like what's happened with Ace Res in the news recently, and none of that is out of the expectation of what could happen. They were all things that kind of were raised and said, well, how are you going to mitigate this, or how are you going to do that? And here they are doing exactly what we were worried about in the first place. So did anyone from the government who engaged with your community and the res community, and at what point did they come here, and what good did they do, if any?
Look, we have had some members of parliament be very, very good to us. John Ruddock comes to mind straight away. When we first touched base with John, he was like, "What's a res? I don't know what you're talking about." And understandably, gosh, at that stage, probably still majority of our communities didn't even know they lived in a res or what a res was. So I get it. But John did make a huge effort and came and did a tour with you and I, and we saw quite a few landowners, 𝗥𝘂𝗿, Casslis, Goulgong kind of districts. He has continued to advocate for us ever since then. So I cannot thank him enough. Mark Banaziak has been another wealth of knowledge. Both John and Mark are New South Wales Upper House members. Mark has always been on the end of the phone or the end of the email or somewhere to standing speaking in Parliament, trying to raise awareness of what is happening on the ground. And you know, as the New England Res rolls out further, both of these men are still supporting them as well. We've had a res tour with One Nation. We've had a few Nationals members come around, but definitely John and Mark stand out to me as being the biggest supporters of trying to see some sort of common sense in this sphere, because you know, everywhere we turn, we are seeing more legislation being rolled out to just make this faster and easier. And they continue to stand up and try and protect us.
So it sounds like without the crossbench willingness, we probably would have been fairly lost, especially given the res was coined when the coalition was in power in New South Wales. What about ministers? What about the government? Who took an interest? Who did what? We're June 2026, and you know, where are they now? What are they doing?
So we had under the New South Wales Farmers banner, which is the only reason that this happened, I believe. Minister Moriarty, so she's the Minister for Agriculture and Western New South Wales, maybe a couple of others in there. She did come and do a tour. You know, she made all the right noises and how terrible and all of those things, and then left and did nothing. And then we had Minister Sharp. She came and met with a group of landowners under the New South Wales Farmers banner again. I don't believe any minister has been out here to address a town hall meeting. We can't even get the CEO of Ace Res or Energy Co to do that. That's a whole nother story. But she did come out and she did sit under the trees with us, as she likes to tell everybody. She told us in that meeting that what had happened so far, so this was February 2024, she told us then that what had happened so far with Energy Co had been unacceptable and that they would do better. And she told us that that was the first meeting of many. I haven't seen her come back yet, so we obviously did something wrong. But she also told us, you know, that 𝗥𝗂𝗍 would be pulled into line and they would do better. Now, I haven't seen that with our transmission affected landowners or the community. And when you look at what he's rolling out with the Hunter Transmission Project and look at the New England REZ, they're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And,
Yeah.
you know, their mode of operation has not changed. So that just makes me think that either Penny Sharp doesn't care, she's got absolutely no control of them, or that is what they are there to do.
There's no design. There's no avoiding that when you do something for the first time, that there's a higher risk of making mistakes and learning from those along the way. And yeah, that could happen to me yet tonight with live streaming. But, you know, for the cost of the REZ, what it was slated to be and now what it is going to cost, the current forecast is, you know, between 5 and 7 billion for the Central West Orana REZ. How do the other REZs, what can they take from what we've learnt? Because obviously there were unavoidable mistakes in rolling it out here, and we're still seeing that happen. You know, we have construction underway of the transmission and projects in all stages of delivery and planning. Is there anything that either the government or the communities in the other REZs can actually take from what's happened here and either do better or change? Or I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I think the one thing that I would say is most important is having a united community. That is something that we didn't even know when we started that we'd already been pulled apart. You know, people are signing up to wind and solar and signing non-disclosure agreements. So even if they wanted to talk to people about what they'd done, they're not allowed to. So
Yeah.
I think, you know, looking at the New England, those guys have got a really strong case. You know, they're all united. They're on one page. And talking to one of the affected landowners from down here, he got to the point that he would not answer the phone to 𝗥𝗂𝗍. His voice message even said, if you are from 𝗥𝗂𝗍, please write me an email. So I think, you know, it's about the tactics of how to handle 𝗥𝗂𝗍. And one of the things that has pleased me and frustrated me at the same time is that I am not directly affected by transmission. So technically, like I don't know the process in and out because I haven't been through it. I've been on the outside of other people going through it. So that is both a blessing and a curse, because I've got not a leg to stand on with 𝗥𝗂𝗍 when it comes to the way that they treat landowners, other than being a community member and calling them out, because I wasn't in it. But people that have been through it are saying don't deal with them unless it's on your terms. Always have your lawyer present. They have to pay for that. Always have them present. And I think what we have learnt, what we learnt the hard way, is doing the right thing, going to community consultation sessions, raising our issues. But what we were doing was editing their damn projects to make them better so that they could get them through the planning process. So, you know, I think that's something that I've learnt, that all the time that we spent raising issues and proposing possible solutions, it was helping them. So I think while it's fine to raise the issues, I wouldn't be going, if I was a landowner, I wouldn't be going to drop-in sessions. I'd be telling them to contact me through my lawyer. And I think what the New England have done in banding all their groups together and saying we're not consulting with you, perfect. I say go for it.
It would certainly save them a whole lot of time and heartache if they didn't trawl through all of those EIS documents and, help refine their project. I've always wondered in the planning process, the first thing you do when you lodge a submission is say whether you're lodging a submission in support or a submission in objection or a submission to comment. And it doesn't matter how many objections or the ratio from objections to support. It seems irrelevant. I don't even know what the purpose is, because if you're a community of 700 and you get 300 objections, you would think that's a pretty fair case for actually reviewing the social license to even contemplate it. But it just doesn't seem to ever come into it. So I agree with you. I hope they avoid some of those, all of that whole process, because I can't see any good that come of the submissions that I've done. Not for the community or not for the landowners impacted, but if we were to wave a magic wand, I personally would hope for a significant change in government and a full repeal on some of this policy that's even rolling it out, and a wipe the slate clean and start again with energy policy, because I have significant concerns about the whole lot. But the reality is here, we've got a transmission project already under construction. The state election's not till next year, and they're fast tracking new policy to prioritise renewable energy projects. Do you have any thoughts on what Minister Sharp is attempting to rush through? She may actually get to put it through if she gets back in Parliament and gets off her suspension. But what are your thoughts on her bill?
Oh, look, I think red flags all the way around. Anything that we have seen her put through so far is just to make the path quicker and easier for renewable energy. So I don't. It's nothing good. And I still, even after however many years of trying to decipher legislation, it's a word salad to me. But always with the red flags, I can just. It's almost like a sixth sense of I don't really understand what it's saying, but it's not something good. So I think it's interesting because there is a huge groundswell. You only have to look at the campaign that the New England has put out, and they've done a fantastic job. I just don't understand how they can keep ignoring them. It makes so little sense to me that they just think that they can keep going, because to me, and a lot of people say that the only way you force change in a government as such is to make them scared that they are going to lose their jobs. I just don't know if they've got very, very thick hides, or they know something that we don't know, but any of it doesn't look good to me. And I think they've gone so far down this path now. And like you said earlier, that the cost blowout from 650 million to between 5 and 7 billion now. I think the last count was 5.5 billion, but it'll be heaps more than that. You only have to look on the ground to see the waste and the destruction that they are causing, that is going to cost us a hell of a lot more money. I mean, the Morothery Road Golden Highway upgrade was meant to take them 5 weeks to complete. It took them 6 months. Like, that's not just a weather blowout or a little boo-boo in timing. That's a major cock-up. So if everything is the same as that, and the cost blows out the more the time it takes, and the Vinegaroy Road Golden Highway, same thing. That was meant to be done by now.
Yep.
Well, we were told not so long ago that they can't get bitumen to finish any of their jobs. So, there's another problem for them. So at what point do you cut your losses and walk away from something? But they double down. Every time something goes wrong, they just double down again, and we keep going down this track. Now, I personally don't think that this is even going to keep the lights on. So I think that's a whole nother discussion. But what do we do when we get all the way down this path and then the lights still aren't on? I don't know.
And in the doubling down, this legislation, on the surface, it appears to be taking away existing levels of due diligence and increasing the power of the ministers to prioritise these projects. And when there were already substantial risks to local communities, to resources, to services, to the whole lot, to then take away some of that due diligence and then just fast track them because the minister's got the power just to sign and through, it should scare the pants off anyone, given what we've already seen here.
Yeah.
Wow. So we've got a list of items that we wanted to talk about tonight. The REZ inquiry, we seen the portfolio committee 7, was it, or 4?
One of the two.
One of the PCs brought a inquiry out to the regions into the impacts of renewable energy zones on rural communities and industries and the whole lot. What was your experience like with the inquiry, and have we seen any benefits from that, and any whisper of what's still yet to come?
So firstly, 𝗥𝘂𝗿 was instrumental in getting that inquiry over the line. So we have to thank Mark hugely, because otherwise this wouldn't have even happened. So they did establish the inquiry in July 2024. I think submissions were due for it the next January. They got 156 submissions at that time. I would actually be interested to know, if they opened it up again, what flows in now after what has happened on the ground now. The impacts of more projects in more areas, and the New England and Hunter being further down the line. Even the construction in this res, would there be more people that kind of went, oh crap, I didn't know that's what that was going to look like. So we had the hearing in Dubbo. Generally when they have a hearing, they do some site visits sort of the day before. I was involved in one of those site visits, and the committee were very good. They were willing to listen to us. It was a pity that not all of the committee members turned up. I think that is a problem. I feel like maybe they should have to, unless they've got they're half dying or something. But the ones that were there were very good. And I feel like their eyes were opened from what they did see. They've had two hearings in Sydney, the one in Dubbo, one in Armidale, one in Singleton, Wollongong and Hay. So they put out an interim report. You might be able to remember when that was, Sal. I can't off the top of my head. But unfortunately, the recommendations for that were watered down compared to what the chair, 𝗥𝘂𝗿 and Sarah Mitchell from the Nats would have liked to see. I think if they had got their recommendations over the line, maybe we would have seen something come of it. So unfortunately, I don't hold really high hopes for what that will ultimately bring about. But I think what it has done is open a lot of people in this region's eyes about what has already happened and what is coming for us. And I think those videos and being able to watch that back that's valuable. And if nothing else, we can sit there and go, well, unforeseen my ass, because we told you that this was all going to happen. Like, and
yeah, well, we better download those videos before they get taken down, like the IPC ones get taken down, because they don't hang around long, because they don't want to give anyone any sort of information about what issues are found with what projects and how they are approached in the conditions of consent.
No, we couldn't.
Now, in opposing the delivery of a REZ, and REZ as being instrumental in a renewable energy transition, one of the most common arguments we are met with from people all across the country is about, well, you can continue farming underneath these projects. And you and I did a bit of a deep dive into what they call 𝗥𝘂𝗿 which is grazing sheep under panels. Do you want to share from the beginning of when that was first raised and the tour that we did and the research that you've been looking for? Do you want to just share your thoughts on all of that?
Look, so I think it's been a word, 𝗥𝘂𝗿 that has been thrown around that look, it kind of drove me wild right from the first go, because you look at the solar panels and you think, how the hell is that possibly even going to still be productive? So, you know, but all of the hype and the advertising around people that are running their sheep under there and that sort of stuff is that, oh, they do so much better. It's all fantastic. And because of the condensation off the panels, it's all wonderful. And so we did go for a visit of New England Solar towards the end of 2024. Now, local landowners have told me, local landowners to that site have told me that is some of the best land in the New England. So what I saw was not what I would have called productive agricultural land. It was flogged. Like and we had these conversations both there and on the way home, that, you know, if my country looked like that, generally speaking, and yes, we have times where it's dry and we've only just come out of one of those where I'm not proud of what our country looks like. But if that's what it looked like, generally speaking, and it wasn't a drought when we went up there, I would have been mortified. There were obvious signs of issues in the wet weather up there, you know, like, and it's interesting when you talk to the developer, it's always rainbows and Skittles. Everything's fantastic until you pick up on, oh, that looks like some bog marks over there. What happened here? Oh, well, yes, that's a wet spot. We had a bit of trouble there. Like, it makes me angry, because nothing is all rainbows and Skittles. None of us have all rainbows and Skittles. I wish we did. So we were also, you know, we were put in touch with ACEN staff, and when we got there and we started asking questions about the running of the sheep and the sheep's welfare and all of those sorts of things, that was put onto the landowners, the people that own the land that run the sheep under those panels. Like, there was no, and there was no talk of them ever coming to the meeting to be able to tell us how wonderful it was, or otherwise, whatever they wanted to tell us.
And answer questions about either management or productivity or the day-to-day. Like, yeah.
That's right. And the day that we went up there was a storm on the way, and they took all the sheep out from under the panels. And I said to the staff, I'm like, hang on a minute, like, isn't that the perfect time for them to be under there? You know, if there's a storm coming, wouldn't they be sheltered? Oh, well, no, that's the landowner's decision. They're getting them out. And they're not, we've decided they're not lambing ewes under there. I'm like, well, if it's about the shelter for them, wouldn't that be the perfect place for them to be? Like, but like, you know, that was all shielded from us because, you know, you ask questions about there are stories about sheep at the 𝗥𝘂𝗿 solar factory at Goulgong being put under those panels and getting caught in the turning mechanism and being killed. And then there's talk about sheep chewing the wires and, you know, ruining the panels. But there's none of this is coming out publicly. And that's all we wanted was the real story of what happens under there. So I also contacted Lightsource BP, who, do they still own Wellington Solar? I think the sale fell through, didn't it?
I'm not sure.
Anyway, that's delving into my memory bank too much. Anyway, Wellington Solar has had sheep running underneath it. And all the advertisements are that it's fantastic and the sheep do better and all of those things, and that there's 6,000 sheep under there. Well, most people, as they drive past, are like, yeah, I saw 10 for the first time in however long. So I don't actually know how many are under there and how often they are under there. But I contacted Lightsource BP several times. Funnily enough, my first few emails went awry somewhere. But I found someone, and they told me that they have so they did a study of sheep grazing under the solar panels versus sheep as the control grazing on their normal paddocks without panels. So they have told me that they have no intention and will not release the full study publicly, but they have released a little tidbit that tells you how much better their wool was and how much more weight they gained and all of that stuff. But I'm like, you can't cherry pick the data that you want to use. And I think it was 24 sheep in each place. So you can't do that and then tell me that running sheep under solar is better without giving me all the information. And that is all I want. I would like to see all the information, and then maybe we can all make up our minds on our own. But I'm calling bullshit, because otherwise you would release that study, wouldn't you?
Yeah. And look, cherry picking data, that has become standard practice in every part of planning these things, and not just in energy either. Like putting forward policy to Australians that is good for them based on cherry picking data. And, you know, we've seen it numerous times, and that's why it's so important to call for transparency and accountability to all levels of government. You look at the federal government and the fact that they won't release the financials behind the capacity investment scheme, and it's only one of the taxpayer funded schemes propping up this transition. You know, what are they hiding? Because if those amounts weren't scary, then surely they would be telling Australians what they're paying for.
Yeah.
New South Wales farmers, you mentioned they helped bring Minister Moriarty and Minister Sharp to the area. What's your involvement with them, and where are they at with the REZ rollout and in supporting farmers in the district?
So, little bit of backstory. My grandfather and my father were long-term New South Wales Farmers members. When my grandfather died, Dad took over his membership. And then when we were impacted by the Golden Highway upgrade, Dad went to New South Wales Farmers then for support. and got nothing. So he dropped our membership then. So
Yeah.
that was the history there. So we weren't members, and then when the REZ really started to kick off, and New South Wales farmers were facilitating some meetings in town and had some people coming, and I thought, righto, well, maybe it's time to jump back on board and see if, you know, they actually are doing anything for us in this space. So we joined up again. That would have been 2023, I think. They have had, New South Wales Farmers has had an energy transition task force. It was for at least a few years before then. They put out a request for expressions of interest to join the energy transition task force. And I got a bit of a tap on the shoulder from the president to put in an expression of interest. I didn't even really know what they did or what it was about, but I just thought, bugger it, we'll give it a go. So expression of interest went in September, early September 2023. So keeping in mind that the conference is in July, I believe. So that's when the previous task force had been, I think they weren't a task force then. It was, I forget what they called it, but a task force was meant to have more weight behind it as such. So they changed it to a task force. Mm-hmm. The task force the members were announced in late October. So that took nearly 2 months. The first meeting was in November. And then that was just by Zoom. So I think there might have been 8 or 9 of us from all around New South Wales. And then we had an in-person meeting in Dubbo in mid-December. So throughout that time, I was starting to get a picture of it seemed like we were covering old ground. And it seemed like we kind of weren't really doing anything. So the in-person meeting pretty much cemented that for me. And I did some digging after that meeting and went through policies that New South Wales farmers have had for probably 3 years before I had joined back up. Policies like, effective as from the 1st of January 2021, the Land Acquisition Just Terms Compensation Act 1991 be updated to make it relevant to the renewable energy explosion across New South Wales. So we still have not seen an updated version of that act, even after they had a review into it. That might have been 2 years ago as well. So I started to feel like, and there were all these other policies in the policy document that I'm like, why is that not doing anything? You know, a moratorium on solar projects. Why have we not pushed that? Anyway, so I did start asking some questions, and generally New South Wales farmers didn't appreciate that. And I felt like the organisation was more into appeasing politicians and keeping them happy than they were supporting and representing their membership. And now, look, I know they're between a rock and a hard place because some members are probably hosts. But when you've got policies on the books that say a moratorium on solar until XYZ has been done, why is that not doing anything? And why are you not banging the doors down of those ministers and saying, this is what our membership wants? So I did resign from that committee or that task force before the end of the term, only just, and I didn't renew my membership. So we were only members again for 12 months or a bit more. I got extremely frustrated that, you know, there's 40 odd staff in New South Wales farmers, paid staff, and I'm not entirely sure what it's achieving as far as representing their membership and actually holding the government to account on behalf of farmers. And when you look at the membership numbers that used to be 14,000 farming enterprises were members of New South Wales farmers, and now, off the top of my head, I'm going to say 3,500 or something like that. It doesn't bode well for them as an organisation. I wouldn't have thought. Like, people have dropped their membership. There've been a lot of memberships drop in the last couple of years over the rapid transition to renewable energy because people feel like they haven't been represented.
So it could be said that a challenge for New South Wales farmers is to actually share publicly what wins they are having, if they are having wins, with the government, and in advocating for and representing farmers and agriculture and protecting food production and rural Australia, because without our rural communities, even our farming sector can't run. You know, that it's integral that they work together. Yeah. Okay, so what we had when the REZ was announced, we had all of these potential issues that local scene could and would happen. And you and I both know that no matter how hard we tried to raise, particularly with the media, but also with our elected MPs, that often they weren't interested in, because we were talking about what might happen or what would happen or what could happen. And it wasn't until things did happen, like 𝗥𝘂𝗿 Road, and now with the latest destruction of Aboriginal items of significance, that we have MPs on the bandwagon, we have media on the hunt. That delay in taking up the fight is incredibly frustrating to people like us. But we are where we are right now. Tell us about 𝗥𝘂𝗿 Road, what happened, how it took place, and then what actually happened when the clearing happened, and where we're at now.
So I think right from the start, there were huge concerns about 𝗥𝘂𝗿 Road, more for the fact at the start that 1.7 kilometres of that road is a floodplain. So that was definitely my biggest concern at the start. You know, thinking about upgrading that road and lifting it, and what that would do to the river system and to surrounding and even upstream and downstream landowners, because you know, when you dam a floodplain that is 1.7 k's long, well, that's going to have huge impacts. So that was my first concern. But in the EIS, so in all the environmental impact statement documents, even in the amendment that we never had a chance to have a say on, by the way, all it said in there was to assist in the facilitation of oversize, overmass, and other construction traffic movements. 𝗥𝘂𝗿 is proposing to upgrade 𝗥𝘂𝗿 Road from its junction with the Golden Highway for around 7 kilometres, including a replacement bridge over the 𝗄𝗏𝗏 River. So it literally just said, we are going to upgrade it. Now, there was a line in there that was a word salad that raised red flags for me when I first read it, that there is another way that they could have put the road upgrades through, as a review of environmental factors or something else, which they have done that as well with other upgrades. But we never, ever got a chance to comment on what the upgrades could actually be, what they would actually look like, what it meant. So I don't know how long I tried to get the designs out of 𝗥𝘂𝗿 and then ACE REZ for, and they wouldn't have a bar of it. Even when they did, I did see them at one stage, I think that was January 2024, there was no talk about every tree in that road corridor being removed. Not until
they didn't spell it out, did they?
No. And I think that was intentional, because they knew that people would get upset with that. So it wasn't until a little bit of information from reliable source fell off the back of a truck that said that they had permission to clear every tree, that I went looking a little deeper, and I did find a management plan on REZ's website that showed that they were going to remove most of the trees. But there were some trees there that it said that they were going to retain. Then we got further word that they were going to remove every tree. So we went to REZ because Energy Co didn't want to talk about it. We went to REZ. A few landowners had come together and come up with an alternative route that would mean avoiding the loss of the trees. It meant moving the road onto land that Energy Co had already purchased outright, and they would have barely had to remove a tree. They probably would have had to remove a few on another road to go across the road. Anyway, so we put that proposal to REZ. I do not even know if it went up the chain to Energy Co. But I can't even tell you how many. We waited a little while for it to come back. The answer was, no, your proposal doesn't comply with Austroad's safety standards, so we can't do that. And it was end of story. And I said to the REZ employee that rang me and told me that, I said, okay, well, let's discuss other options. Let's put what's the constraint? Oh, one of the bends is too hard and, you can't get round it. Okay, how about we have a speed limit? That means, and maybe the road that you are going to build is only for your traffic. So we leave the other road for general traffic and you just have your road for the oversize over mass loads. Oh, no, we can't do that. Why not? Because the transmission towers are going to be in the road. There was no talk about transmission towers a minute ago. It was the Austroad standards that was the only thing that was holding us back. And I kid you not, it got to the point that this bloke would not talk to me on the phone anymore. He was just like, I've got nothing to say to you. Okay. And that is how it went. And he just shut down and there was no further talk from that until then we found out that when they were removing the trees, so we went and had a protest. And funnily enough, instead of actually impacting the traffic and stopping the traffic, they put the traffic through their project footprint and had another road through the paddocks anyway. So to me, they could have just used that the whole time, and they chose not to. They chose to do that. They chose to remove those trees in the middle of nesting season for all of those birds. And it was all choices. And that is what drives me absolutely bananas, is that, afterwards it was, oh no, we had to do it this way. It was how it had to happen. Well, it's bullshit. That's not how they had to do it. They had alternatives and they chose to do what they did. And then when you question what actually happened on the ground, in a conversation with the REZ CEO, everything that we saw on the ground is not what actually happened, apparently. You can't go to them and say, this is what I've seen. And they, oh no, that didn't happen. Oh, okay. Well, I must have either lost my mind or, been seeing things. So whatever way this rolls out, we don't have a leg to stand on, essentially, unless you have a photo of someone up a tree with a club killing a bird. You've got nothing.
Yeah. It to me it highlights the fundamental flaw of top-down planning for any significant development, whether it's energy or industry or services or even a community development. If it's someone external doing the planning and plopping it on top of a community or a region, it's setting up to fail. Whereas if any any development is planned from the ground up, from those where the development will take place, those who benefit, those who are impacted. When it is designed and planned by them, their heart, their minds, their passion for the future are all integral in the plan that they put on the table and then work towards. And 𝗥𝘂𝗿 Road is a prime example. The whole REZ failure to date is a prime example of why top-down planning, it is not in the best interest of rural Australia or any community in Australia, I would go so far to say. Now, the next big Red Cross for ACE REZ in the delivery of the CWO REZ was the complete destruction of Aboriginal items of significance. Tell us about what's been on the media and how that's working. And also, didn't community raise some of these issues for these projects prior to that happening?
Oh, 100%. And, that's one of the most frustrating things is, all these impacts are being called unforeseen. Well, maybe they were unforeseen for 𝗥𝘂𝗿 and ACE REZ, but everyone else saw this coming a mile away. And raised the issues. It's not like they weren't brought up, but it's probably in all the paperwork that left with all the previous community engagement staff or something. I don't know. They probably
that's right, because they had their planning team. They replaced the planning team, and then they've brought in a new team for delivery. Then they've given ACE REZ the green light, who are a whole new team as well, who weren't around at the planning stage. So there's clearly no flow of information on what is raised, and the process is failing us. It's failing rural communities. It's failing New South Wales, and it will ultimately fail by scale Australia. Okay, now in the media, what did they actually do?
So as far as I know, and most of my information is coming from what I have read and what I have seen, the videos that I have seen. There was an Aboriginal rock shelter that has just been completely annihilated. There's also grinding groove stones that have had a bulldozer run over the top of them. Now, Andrew G has brought a lot of this to light. He's the federal member for 𝗥𝘂𝗿, and when he first brought it all up, ACE REZ denied it, completely denied it. And then when he had all the evidence, they had to do a complete 180, be like, oh gosh, we're so sorry. It's just, it just goes to the whole situation. It's just when they get caught that they say sorry, and then we move on. So I don't know what the outcome of this will be, because, there were a lot of complaints that went in about 𝗥𝘂𝗿 Road, and there was, the 𝗥𝘂𝗿, ACE REZ, and the Department of Planning all wrote back to people and went, oh no, they've done everything to the letter of the law. Nothing was wrong here. Well, I don't know how they can get away with this one, because it is blatantly obvious what they've done. Now, I'm not Aboriginal, but for those people that those sites are sacred to them. So once you've ruined them, what do you do then? I don't know how you come back from that, and they shouldn't be allowed to come back from that. It's just blatant disrespect.
The public deserves not only an apology, but there deserves to be some accountability. To ignore those were mapped items of significance, as there are mapped items underneath these renewable projects. There was a wind project down near you that had high level items of high significance and items of low significance. And there was one item of high significance that they were unsure of whether they could mitigate the impacts or avoid the impacts. So they were granted approval in the original conditions of consent to relocate if necessary. Well, do the Australian people understand that this is what the New South Wales government is allowing to happen? people need to see some accountability. And as a side note, Andrew G, if you happen to see this, if someone shares this with you, Facebook is somehow restricting the view of your videos, even though the numbers are quite big. There are times, there are days when we go to find your videos and Facebook gives us an error message that says this cannot be found. It may have been deleted by the original poster. And your page can't even be found in the search by someone who is not a follower. So I don't know who's pulling levers to do with Facebook and Andrew G and his videos. Thank you for doing them. Thanks for raising awareness. But it's not reaching as many people as it could because we are trying to share them, and some days and sometimes, and there's no rhyme or rhythm to it, we can't find you or your videos. Okay, so we are pushing 2 hours. Let's have a look at what haven't we talked about that you really want to touch on, and where are we right now?
Look, I suppose that the best thing to talk about is where we are right now. So construction continues for the transmission. We're seeing towers go up. We're seeing the energy hub take shape. There are apparently 600 workers living in the workers' camp. I've heard whispers that they're not going to go ahead with the cashless workers' camp. They're just going to put the extra 600 at 𝗥𝘂𝗿. Of course, I can't get any actual answers out of ACE REZ. The answer is we are focusing on 𝗥𝘂𝗿 at present. I understand there have been quite big issues with the construction of the camp. Work's not up to standard, and so that is going slower than it should be. We are seeing road upgrades roll out all along the Golden Highway and other places as well to facilitate the movement of oversize, overmass loads, mostly intersections. I think there's a overtaking lane that's meant to be put in closer to Merriwa, Dunedoo side of Merriwa, and they're doing pullover bays as well, so that when you get stuck behind an oversized overmass load, they can pull off the road and you can go past after you've been behind them for 100 k's and are really happy about the situation. But the thing that frustrates me about that is that we're already seeing the movements for the 𝗥𝘂𝗿 wind factory, and none of this is complete. So we're seeing the impacts of the actual movements while they're doing the roadworks, and they're not completing an intersection before they start the next one. They're kind of doing them all half-assed, and so it's 60 and 40 and 80, and everyone's getting frustrated with it taking an extra half an hour to get to town or whatever. So yes, we're seeing the impacts roll out. I think it will only get worse, which is scary considering what we have already seen. It's looking a little bit better water-wise now. We've had quite a bit of rain in the last few weeks, but before that, we were hearing from landowners whose bores were dropping when they didn't even drop in 2019. You can't tell me that that's not an impact of all the water that is going to REZ projects or to the road upgrades. But it just doesn't disappear like that. So no, I think, sorry.
One big challenge that we've got with the roads, the upgrades, the OSOM loads, even with water, there's no ongoing assessment of these impacts and how they are being felt. So the original timelines back when EnergyCo constructed them with the projects of where they were at with their planning, they weren't even in delivery. They mapped out when the peak of the OSOM loads would be through, and they worked out when the peak water usage would be, and they worked out when the peak accommodation requirements would be. but there's no public ongoing assessment. And if there is, they should make it public to even know whether we are approaching a tipping point that no one knows is coming, because these projects, it would appear from where we sit that they are being delayed, that there are holdups, there are cost blowouts. There's uncertainty for some of these projects where they're at in the assessment process. So where does that all look like? And at what point will the public be able to see that there's a big problem coming? And it may be around roads, it might be around water, it might be around biodiversity loss, because none of it is being assessed in an ongoing manner, because their claim is that the New South Wales planning process of looking at these projects in isolation is a-okay, and that each new project, when they come on the scene, they just have to check in with the previously approved projects for any cumulative impacts. But then there's no ongoing assessment when those impacts are felt, and it's up to the public to report them, as we've seen with Marlborough Road, report them and then be told nothing to see here. Has there been any progress with the tax laws for the compensation paid to landowners that are under the transmission? Now, just a reminder for everyone that these people are not choosing to become hosts of transmission. They're being forced to reach an agreement with the New South Wales government, and then they are paid compensation for their losses. But the federal government taxes those compensation payments in the current tax laws. So has there been any progress with that?
I did see something pop up the other day that it has been raised through the energy ministers. I don't even know what they call it, but all the state and territory ministers get together with the federal minister, and it has been raised. But the tax implications of the CWO REZ transmission have already been felt. And the biggest issue that I have with that, okay, so they've got the strategic benefit payment scheme. I think that's what they call it. So it's, I believe it's $200,000 over 20 years for a kilometre of transmission lines. And I might stand corrected on that, but it's something like that. So they're telling you that, they're being very generous. That's just an extra payment just because you're being such good people and hosting these lines. And then they take half that money back. Then there is the compensation under the Just Terms Act, for loss of infrastructure and that sort of stuff. So the person that I've been dealing the most with and know the most about their situation, they're losing shade trees as an example on their place because of the transmission lines. So they've said to Energy Co, righto, how are you going to replace the shade and shelter for stock in those paddocks until, 30 years down the track when we've got the trees to grow again? So they were offered shade sales. So that's what they went with. And they were given X amount of funding to buy X amount of shade sales. So, but when the tax man comes and he takes potentially 47% of that, you only end up with half the amount of shade sales that you were meant to get. What about the person who's having to build a new house because Energy Co have impacted their home so much? Do they only get half a house? It blows my mind. So that's probably the next thing for the next lot of people under the transmission lines. Don't take money, make them buy the actual infrastructure for you. If you're getting shade sales, make them buy X number of shade sales. Don't take the money. But so until this is, it needs to be, what's the right word when they back pay it? If they change a law and then they
in retrospect.
Yeah. So if they do change something, they have to put that in so that the people that have already been impacted by this do not miss out as well. So that's just going to be a whole nother mess of trying to sort that out. Now, I have also been told that Revenue New South Wales offered Energy Co the opportunity for them to do tours around the reses to discuss the land tax implications for people hosting renewable energy projects and do seminars so that people understand what that looks like, and Energy Co never took them up on that. Like, is it not better for people to be informed?
That's right. And that's a different tax issue. So there's
absolutely
income tax, and then there's the land tax, and that is a very grey area. And I know some people are trying to get to the bottom of it. And Energy Co said no.
Well, that's what I've heard.
Wow. No surprises there from our perspective, but
no.
Just if you were new to this whole rollout, that would just be another eye-opener of Energy Co's lack of care and respect for people in these communities and impacted by these state developments that they had no choice in. They had no say in.
Yeah.
And they didn't even know about it until it was too late.
Yeah.
Okay, so community benefits are starting to roll out. There's money flowing into the CWO REZ, and I seen the other day there was an announcement for one of the southern reses, 60 million or something. So, you know, there's money flowing into these areas that will attempt to buy some perceived social license. Cumulative impacts are still being they're not even still being assessed. They've been assessed to some level, and now they're not being assessed in an ongoing way. And their impacts to both local governments and to communities. So in one hand, we've got money flowing for community benefits. In the other hand, we've got these impacts which mostly remain unaddressed. Where to from here? Like, what? The simple answer is not here, not there, not anywhere. Like, go back to the drawing board. But in reality, it's happening. It's happening tonight. It's happening tomorrow. It's happening next week. It's happening next month. These communities are facing these decisions about how they manage these community benefits, what they take and what they don't, how they simultaneously appeal to not just the government, but to the public to have some of these impacts addressed in the process, instead of just, you know, gold plating infrastructure developments in small rural towns, and in worst case scenarios, bloody delivering essential services that should have been worthy of rural communities having anyway. So I'm going to stop talking, and I want you to share your thoughts on all of that.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Look, I completely agree with you. Community benefits for hosting a res, for having a res lumped on you, should be over and above the services that we receive as ratepayers and taxpayers. But what we are seeing is the services that our rates and our tax funding should be paying is what we're getting as a result of being in a res. And that it makes absolutely no sense to me, because, you know, water and sewerage should be self-funding local government projects. But we know that all our local government areas are struggling for funding. They're all, well, majority of them anyway, are struggling. So of course, when someone offers you funding that you can't seem to find, of course you're going to take it. But we're not seeing communities actually benefit on top of the services that they should receive anyway. And that's, to me, what community benefits should be. It shouldn't be an upgrade to the sewerage system. It shouldn't be, a new playground in the park, unless it's, a flying fox and something fun that no one else has ever seen. And
yeah, like a zip line from Cooler Tops into town.
Yeah, like that is what it should be. Some sort of major tourist attraction that goes, holy crap, there's not one of those anywhere. Let's do that. But instead what we're seeing is a little bit of, funding thrown here and there to make everyone feel better about the fact that we are being absolutely screwed. So, and I think the other thing about community benefits, it should be benefiting everybody. I don't know how many times I've heard people, or how many times I've said it myself. Okay, maybe people that are impacted by projects, pay their rates for them. That it's not, hosts, anyone, whatever. Sorry, if you're in this area, we're paying your rates this year. Like, do something that actually benefits everybody. Not, and I do. Sorry.
No, how about actually eliminating the costs of energy for all those that live within a res?
Exactly. Yep.
Like,
perfect.
Pay the power bills. If that's too astronomical of a cost, pay half the power bills. I don't know, but actually, like, lower the cost of energy to those that are directly impacted in providing it for the rest of the country.
Exactly. Like, surely, I mean, God, surely there's people smarter than you and I sitting there thinking about these things. Like, bloody hell, we are paying so many public servants to sit there, and I honestly don't know what they're doing, because they're not coming up with ways to make life better or easier or anything. Like, surely there are ways that these companies could come out and go, righto, no one's ever done this for you before, have they? Gosh, this will buy us some support in this town. There are things that you could do. I mean, I don't know. There's so many options that they could actually potentially garner more support. Like, what if the thing about one major project is that they build a small project with a battery that powers the small town that they're closest to.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe no one has to pay for their power. Surely there are things that they could come up with that would not cost them too much money. But, the trouble is, I think the waters are muddied with all the subsidies that are being thrown at these developers as well. So no one probably really knows how much what's costing, because someone's paying this bit and someone else will pay this bit in a while. And then when it comes to decommissioning, our $10 shell company will probably fall off the perch and it won't exist anymore, and we'll just leave it for the landowners to clean up. Like, it just, I don't.
We've been, well-trained citizens through this 5-year process on engaging every step of the way with all of this, and looking for ways to improve the rollout, looking for ways to mitigate impacts to our land, to our communities, to our people. We are still, even in our conversation now, we are still talking about potential solutions to the communities directly impacted by REZ rollouts across the country, when in reality, we should be questioning the case for change. We should be saying, well, no, these developments are not what's best for our future. If we need to generate energy and we need to diversify sources, then you bring us to the table at the time when we talk about how we do that. We've been invited to consult on a box, and everything else that is important to us was outside of that box before we started. And moving forward, we can either, or maybe we need to do both, we need to somehow come up with solutions for what we are unable to stop. But hopefully with our continued, and not just ours, with the wider public's continued sharing of what is happening on the ground, then hopefully some of this and more of it can be pulled up, and common sense and realistic energy solutions can be debated at tables that don't include you and I, don't include farmers, but they include those that can map out a picture that does not leave anyone left completely run over. Balance is key. Consultation on the ideas is key. And the title of this discussion, Rural Resolutions, I want us to finish off now with some potential resolutions, some solutions for the towns and areas that might not be as far down this road as what we are, even some solutions for our communities, given that we are in this place where we have construction commenced of some projects, we've got delivery of others, we've got others in planning. Let's just spend 5 minutes before we call it a night and look at some potential solutions, because that is what I want, not just us to think about, but anyone who's listening to this in the future, to entertain the idea that what has happened to this point is unacceptable. It's un-Australian. It does not bode for a bright and prosperous future for rural Australia. We are being forced to take part in a national and a state planning disaster, and we will pay the ultimate price. So let's have a think about some solutions. Any off the cuff straight now, that, and keeping in mind that we're just two everyday Aussie women, part of a small rural community, but hopefully with our, questions and ideas, maybe others can think of them too, and we can really start to make change.
Look, I think, Sal, the first thing that comes to mind is, do you remember a few years ago we had a Zoom with Jared Rennick? And the thing that has stuck with me this whole time is we kept saying to him, we don't have time. We don't have time. This is going to keep happening. We don't have time. And his words were, you can always pull it down after it's been built. So look, I think my biggest thing, and this is something that I said to Penny Sharp when we met with her in February 2024, was we need to pause. Just slow the hell down and let's work out what is actually going to work. And, you and I both know we are not experts in this field, but we know our land, we know our communities, and something that one of the transmission affected landowners has said to me more than once, and other people have said it too, is if someone can explain to farmers, landowners, rural people why something has to happen and why it is the best choice, we will probably bloody well help you build it. Like, if someone could have explained to us why was this transmission line, the rapid transition to renewable energy, is the best course of action and it is the best way to go, like, most of these people would have just stepped aside and gone, righto, if you avoid that, and that, on board, 100% on board. Probably would have helped you dig the holes to cement the friggin' transmission lines in. So I think that is something, and you are 100% right, that we need a voice in what this looks like. And I think it actually needs to be right from the start. Yes, there are people that are experts in this field, but they are not experts in how farming works or the exact bits of land that they might need for infrastructure. So what makes sense to me straight up is that we just slow down. Now, when you look overseas, you look at people going away from renewable energy. So that says to me that there's some problems there. And maybe, oh God, I live off grid. There is a place for it, but it needs to be managed, and it is intermittent as a source of energy, and that is something that I have learnt over the past 3 years. That until you have lived with solar as your primary source of power, it is hard to imagine when you don't have it. And we never went without. We have a generator and we have batteries, but it's surprising when it works and when it doesn't work. So I think my biggest thing is slow down, and yes, take away the targets, for Christ's sake. Like, we are not going to save the planet by hitting net zero by 2050. Like, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. So let's move away from that for a start. Take the pressure off, and from that, things will happen that need to happen. And like I said, I'm not an expert, but coal has built this country, and maybe it's not 100% the future, but there are other options that we have literally just got the blinkers on, and we are doubling down on something that I predict is going to be a huge disaster for not only rural and regional areas, but for Australia as a whole. And I don't know if we can come back from that if we go too far down. Like, it is going to take a huge shock to get away from that. But I think the first step is to slow the hell down and just work out what we actually should be doing.
Yeah. And to ignore warning signs, like there's a lot of warning signs. There's researchers, there's think tanks, there's industry professionals, there's even the warning signs from farmers on local issues and local impacts or regional impacts. To ignore all of those and just push straight through is ignorance at best and negligence and corruption at worst. Yeah. For the people listening, I think one thing we can all do is actually allocate some time to get to know more about where your power comes from and what is changing in the regions, what this transition actually looks like to us, to rural communities that are predominantly agriculture service towns. Learn how that works. And if you are concerned, or if you have questions, or if you think that the transition should be reviewed, or the REZs are dangerous, or climate change is crock, actually put pen to paper and write to your local MP and send it on to as many of your elected representatives as possible. Because write to Minister Sharp, write to the Shadow Minister for Energy, Mr. Griffin, and tell them what you think and fill their inbox. Because while we are quiet, as we found with the consultation process, the government takes and receives our lack of engagement or our lack of response as acceptance and compliance. So if you're not telling them that you're unhappy, you don't want to see your food risked for unreliable energy, you don't want to see the country's economy risked and pushed into recession or even poverty. Like, spell out what your concerns are and ask them to represent you, but put it on paper and send it in. And if everyone was to do that, fill their inbox, I'm sure they wouldn't be as confident as Penny Sharp is when she stands in budget estimates and says that we've got to make these, that we are on track to make 2032 or 2035 or whatever. Thank you, Emma, for joining me tonight. It has been a long conversation, and I don't think we've even scratched the surface of what really what the last 5 years has been like. But it's been certainly a good start, and we may come back to this if people have sent in any specific questions of areas that we haven't covered. We're happy to cover them and go into whatever detail is needed. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Look, I suppose my only thought is a thank you to you, Sal. I'm not sure that without each other we would still be here, and your willingness to keep banging your head against that brick wall has kept mine going as well. So I think yeah, you deserve a lot of credit, and putting your hand up to do a lot of things, and the rural resolutions is only helping the rest of us. So thank you.
Thank you. We're a bit like two legs of a three-legged stool. You know, if you sit on it in just the right way, we manage to still stay upright, but knock one of those legs out and we'd be history. Anyway, thank you. And to those that have joined us tonight, and to those that might watch later on, thanks for listening. And if you are surprised with what you've heard and you want to help spread the word, then share it with your friends and networks, share it with your family in city areas, and see if we can get the word out there that not everything is rosy and green and clean with the transition to renewables and how it's impacting on our rural communities. Thanks again, Emma. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.